Welcome back to the Badass Literature Society, where badasses come together to rate and review novels recommended by you. Hi, I'm Michael.
This is Barbara.
And I'm Lauren.
If you guys remember, we had a contest going on last month, and today we're going to announce the winner. So the winner, drumroll please, of our contest is on Instagram at Carswell_Captain_Thorn. So congratulations. You'll be getting a DM from us shortly, and with a list of our upcoming books, so you can pick one of them, and we'll send you a copy. Or if you want to, you can recommend a new book, and we'll send you a copy of that, and we'll add it to our list for our episodes. And then you can also, if you'd like, co-host that episode over the book that you choose. So once again, congratulations. And thanks to all who participated. We'll hopefully be doing this every once in a while to interact with you guys some more.
Thank you for everyone who participated.
Yeah.
Yes, so this month we read Hogfather by Terry Pratchett, and it was recommended to us by a listener at None More Glitter. Thank you for the recommendation.
Like normal, we'll split the episode into two sections, a spoiler-free discussion and our overall group score, and then a more in-depth discussion of the plot and the ending, which will obviously be spoiler-heavy, and our individual scores for the book. First, let's talk about the author. Born Terence David John Pratchett, Sir Terry Pratchett sold his first story when he was 13, which earned him enough money to buy a secondhand typewriter. His first novel, a humorous fantasy entitled The Carpet People, appeared in 1971 from the publisher Colin Smythe. Terry worked for many years as a journalist and press officer, writing in his spare time and publishing a number of novels, including his first Discworld novel, The Color of Magic, in 1983. In 1987, he turned to writing full-time. There are over 40 books in the Discworld series, of which 4 were written for children. Now I'm going to send it over to Barbara to talk about some of the accolades and awards for Hogfather.
So this was originally published on November the 7th of 1996. Obviously, there's a bunch of different versions now that have been republished since then. The genre are considered fantasy, comedy, science fiction, and holiday. It is 432 pages, but that's kind of a discrepancy because I feel like the Kindle was only 355, so I feel like depending on the version that you have, the pages are going to be a little off. And it currently has a 4.22 out of 5 on Goodreads and a 4.7 out of 5 on both Amazon and Barnes & Nobles. And it was nominated for the British Fantasy Award for Best Novel back in 1997.
Right.
Obviously, before Goodreads came out, there's no Goodreads stuff on there.
Now Lauren's going to go over a synopsis or the jacket cover of the book.
Susan had never hung up a stocking. She'd never put a tooth under her pillow in the serious expectation that a dentally inclined fairy would turn up. It wasn't that her parents didn't believe in such things. They didn't need to believe in them. They knew they existed. They just wished they didn't. There are those who believe and those who don't. Through the ages, superstition has had its uses. Nowhere more so than in the Discworld, where it's helped to maintain the status quo. Anything that undermines superstition has to be viewed with some caution. There may be consequences, particularly on the last night of the year when the time is turning. When those consequences turn out to be the end of the world, you need to be prepared. You might even want more standing between you and oblivion than a mere slip of a girl, even if she has looked death in the face on numerous occasions.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun.
So, what did you guys think of the Hogfather? And remember, no spoilers. Barbara?
I really enjoyed reading this. I was a little confused at first since I didn't realize it was part of a bigger series and a sub-series that involved death. But once I got past that initial bit of the book and figured out, oh, okay, these characters are in other books, I really started to enjoy it. I wasn't a fan of the note chapters in the book. That was just a bit jarring since I use chapters to kind of gauge when I should take a break from my reading. But I loved the humor and enjoyed, honestly, all of the characters. I don't think there's one character I did not enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with Barbara. I really enjoyed the book as well. It was, like she said, the only thing I didn't like was the lack of the chapters, just because, like Barbara said, that's how I gauge when I'm going to stop reading, whether it's like for the night or I'm going to set it down for a little bit. Once you get into the book, you figure out where his pauses are, and you can stop at those places. But it was definitely a little bit different. But as far as the story, I really liked the story. I thought it was interesting. I love Terry Pratchett's tongue-in-cheek humor that's present throughout the book, and it should give you some indication that Barbara and I have already acquired a couple of the other Discworld books that we're interested in reading too. So
I liked this one. I also didn't know that it was part of a bigger series. I'd never heard of Hogfather or whatever. It was just like
Discworld is the name of the series.
Discworld.
Yeah.
I didn't know what that was. I thought that was just kind of the dystopia thing that we were reading. I didn't realize it was part of a bigger world, and so that was interesting. I struggled to get into it at first, though I did like the introductory few chapters. I also struggled just reading the physical book. I'm used to audiobooks with my infant, and so I struggled with that a little bit. I really loved all the characters. I think that the humor was good. I enjoyed that. There was a lot of it. And it was kind of interesting just because it's more of like a dark book, but then like with the humor in there, it was kind of unexpected for me. And I also liked that there was another badass woman character in it. And I also hated that there were no chapters, but I'll get to that later.
So, like normal, we're not going to go into our individual ratings right now. You got to wait for that. But our group score for this one ended up being a 7.25.
Michael's favorite.
Damn decimals out of 10. So, would you recommend this book? Lauren?
Yes, I would recommend this book. I think that it's kind of bizarre. And so if you're not into like more of the dystopian type novels, or, I mean, I guess I would recommend it, but tell people to be prepared for some weird shit going on. Just, and I'll leave it at that just to avoid any spoilers. But I would recommend it. I think it was good.
I would also recommend it. I enjoyed the book. I think that, it'd be a fun book to read around the holidays for some people. I actually found when I was looking for discussion questions for this book, a lot of people said it's something that they read every holiday because they think
I saw that.
So.
Did we mean to read this around the holidays, or did this just line up?
It just kind of happened. It just lined up well. But yeah, I mean, I would recommend it. I think it was an entertaining book. I think that even people who aren't really into fantasy books would still like this because I think Terry Pratchett's writing style is very approachable, and it's not like super heavy-duty fantasy. Barbara, what about you?
To parrot what Michael said, since he looked at my notes, and he loves doing that to us, 100% I would recommend this book. It's not a book that's going to change your thinking of life, I don't think, but it's a fun read. It's not heavy, and it's just an overall enjoyable book. And honestly, I thought it was perfect and fun to read for the holiday season because it has to do with a warped sense of Christmas. And then I would just recommend the book to anyone who kind of wants a break from something heavy or just intense reading and just kind of wanted to pick up a fun book with really cool, interesting characters and dark humor because that's my jam. So yeah, I would recommend it. I probably would mention the whole jarring no chapter.
So they're prepared.
Because when I was like, I don't know when to stop reading. So that was a little frustrating in the beginning. But besides that, yeah, I would. And I think anyone would enjoy. I don't think you have to enjoy high fantasy or fantasy because it takes place in version of our world, really.
And it also it's especially with the holiday storyline. It's also very relatable for people because there's a lot of parallels to Christmas, and so I feel like it could be enjoyable it's not that out there fantasy minus the whole random weird shit I'm talking about.
Yeah. Maybe, but you should know this is how all of Terry Pratchett's books are. When Barbara and I said we like this one, looked at some of the other ones, they're all this way. His books are literally, it's got about the author, little tiny dedication page, I guess that's what it's called, and then it literally just says begin reading.
Yeah. Did he ever decide to make chapters?
I don't think so. So yeah, that's our short review of everything at the beginning. For those of you leaving us at this point, don't forget to give us a rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you guys listen if you like us. And make sure you're following us on both Instagram as well as our Facebook page. Both places we are at Badass Lit Pod. We'd love to hear from you. If you've got a book you want us to read, let us know. If you've got feedback or a recommendation or some new segment you'd like to hear us do, let us know. And now for a short preview of our next episode.
Next month, we're reading The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman, which was recommended to us by listener at Books A World in Between. The preview of The Ocean at the End of the Lane. Sussex, England. A middle-aged man returns to his childhood home to attend a funeral. Although the house he lived in is long gone, he is drawn to the farm at the end of the road, where, when he was 7, he encountered a most remarkable little girl, Letty Hempstock, and her mother and grandmother. He hasn't thought of Letty in decades, and yet, as he sits by the pond, a pond that she'd claimed was an ocean, behind the ramshackle old farmhouse, the unremembered past comes flooding back. And it is a past too strange, too frightening, too dangerous to have happened to anyone, let alone a small boy. 40 years earlier, a man committed suicide in a stolen car at this farm at the end of the road. Like a fuse on a firework, his death lit a touch paper and resonated in unimaginable ways. The darkness was unleashed, something scary and thoroughly incomprehensible to a little boy. And Letty, magical, comforting, wise beyond her years, promised to protect him no matter what. A groundbreaking work from a master, The Ocean at the End of the Lane is told with a rare understanding of all that makes us human, and shows the power of stories to reveal and shelter us from the darkness inside and out. It is a stirring, terrifying, and elegiac fable, as delicate as a butterfly's wing, and as menacing as a knife in the dark.
So that is what you guys have to look forward to next month when we come in and we do Ocean at the End of the Lane. Remember, the second part of our podcast that we're getting to now is an in-depth look at the book. So if you want to read the book, stop listening right now and come back when you're done. But for those of you sticking around for the spoilers, here we go. So the first thing we're going to start off with in this spoiler-free, no, not spoiler-free, spoiler-heavy section is a new segment that we're going to be doing.
Season 2.
Yeah, for our Season 2, we're going to be doing in every episode, which is our Badass Character Award, where we determine who was the most badass character in the book. And I'm going to let Barbara start on this one as to who her nomination would be.
I mean, the most obvious is Death. So I feel like that's a cop-out if I give it to Death. So I'm going to give it to Susan. Because I feel like she's his protege in the sense that she's learning the ropes of how to become Death, begrudgingly wanting to do it. And she's a total badass because she saves the day at the end. Because she can, because she's technically half human. And Death can't intervene in this type of stuff. So my nominee is Susan.
Can we do multiple of the same nominee?
Yeah. Because that's determines who wins.
If somebody else nominates the same person, then that person.
I nominate Susan as well, for the similar reasons as Barbara did. I mean, she's just throughout the whole novel, just like steadily a badass the whole time, taking care of the monsters with the poker, nanny style, and just throughout the whole thing continues to be a badass female character. So that's why she gets my nomination.
So my nomination, which I don't think is a cop-out, was going to be Death. I think Death was the most badass character in this book, and especially because Terry Pratchett's version of Death is very different than the traditional Death we're used to reading about in other books. He's hilarious, and he's incredibly fascinated by humans, in some cases trying to mimic some of their behavior, but that would have been my vote, was Death, but apparently because the other two people voted for Susan is officially the badass character of this episode. So first question after our award there, what did you like about the book? What did you dislike? Was there a specific point in the story where you really felt like you got hooked in? And I'll start first on this one. So I liked most of the book. I mean, I really liked the characters. I liked the setting. I liked that it kind of takes place in a world that's similar to ours in a lot of ways, but just as different in a lot of ways. Like it feels like Earth, but there's magic, and then you remember that it's actually this disc floating on top of a turtle's back that's hurtling through the galaxy and all that. So
Balanced on elephants.
Right. Yeah. So I really liked the world that he built for not just this book, but for the whole series.
Who thinks of that?
I know, right?
Right?
Smart people.
Yeah.
And so I really liked that. So I really liked that. I really liked the characters. I really liked Susan. I really liked Death. There actually really weren't any characters in the book that I hated by any means, but I was like, ugh, this character was deleted. The book would be so much better, and that's just not the case. Like, everybody had their place. It's big and small. I loved the humor in the book. I thought that it was very funny. I found myself laughing out loud a couple times reading it, which doesn't always happen. As far as what I disliked, I think the only couple things would be just the structure, which I guess would be Terry Pratchett's writing style, the lack of chapters. But after about a third of the book, I feel like I was used to that, but I still didn't enjoy it. I think I'd prefer the traditional structure. I think that was really the only thing I really disliked about the. There were times where the pacing was a little bit off. I feel like that was a little bit all over the place. There were certain scenes where it was like, God, I can't put the book down. I want to keep going. And there are other parts where it was, oh man, I'm forced myself to pick this up and read. And so that was kind of all over the place, which is part of my score that you hear later. But as far as what really hooked me into the story, it was probably when death gets introduced. I really liked, like I said, like Terry Pratchett's version of death. I thought that was very interesting. It's probably the point that I got hooked in. Either that or when Susan beat up the first monster with the fire poker.
That was it for me.
During the employer's dinner party.
Yep, that was it.
Barbara, you gonna go next?
I really enjoyed the book, obviously. I liked the dark humor. I think this is British humor, I believe.
Yeah.
And I enjoy British humor because I feel like it's very tongue-in-cheek and dark. And I enjoy that kind of humor. I'm not a huge, potty humor person, so I really like that. I enjoyed all of the characters, even the bad guys and stuff like that. I liked the motivation that they had behind it. He was a smart character. Wasn't there just to be a bad guy. I feel like he actually had a purpose. And same with the other bad characters too, because I feel like there's two bad characters.
Yeah, it's his whole crew of bad.
Well, there's Titam, Tiatam.
Tinman.
So you had him, and then obviously you had the whole reasoning behind everything, which would be the auditors of reality behind the whole plot of killing the Hogfather. The thing I dislike, I think we're all going to parrot this. It's just the formatting. It was very jarring to read in the beginning. I was very lost because I didn't realize there's no chapters.
Yeah.
So it took a second for my brain to register we were jumping between characters. And this book does that a lot. And there's a lot of characters. And
so I did read that apparently the physical copy of this book, it's easier to discern the breaks. We all read this on the Kindle.
Right.
So and the Kindle copy is apparently harder than the physical copy is. So there's still not chapters by any means, but the break is apparently a little bit more evident.
Okay.
Is what I read online anyway in the physical copy.
That makes sense. Because, there's no pages in a Kindle.
Right.
And whereas in a book, you can literally just leave a page blank, which I've seen authors do that. So maybe that was our bad for reading the Kindle, not the actual physical copy of the book. So I'm not going to, harp on that too much. I think another little thing I would just gripe about would be the pacing as well. I feel like there were certain moments where we would have random characters and just for that small of a chapter to talk about it. And it added to the humor of the story, especially when they're talking about how Death, as the Hogfather, decided to give these random people food. And obviously you can't create, he doesn't create, where do you get the food from? So he stole the food from this high French restaurant. So you have this chapter where it's talking about the restaurant and they're serving muddy boots to people as food. And that was a bit random. Was that chapter hilarious? Yeah, 100%. Or was that section, I should say, there's no chapters. Was that section hilarious? Yeah, 100%. But I felt that was a little off kilter and not really needed for the overall story. As far as what hooked me in, I think when Susan was first introduced and she was being a kind of a badass, and then of course Death. Another thing what I do wish was I feel like we would have made the connection between characters sooner had we read the first few books of the Death series of the Discworld, because we didn't realize that Susan was related to Death until
way
at least
later.
I didn't until way later when they kind of mentioned it. I'm like, oh,
That makes
okay,
sense.
that makes sense. Or also who she was. I would have had a feeling that we would have known that she was special and half Death and not just this sweet badass character that can slay the boogeymen and stuff like that. I feel like we kind of lost a bit of that for not reading the other books of the Death series, and I'm doing that in quotes there, because I know this is an overall, I think it's number 20 in the overall Discworld series and number 4 in the Death series, where he's featured the most. So
Yeah, and technically all of these books, I mean, they say you could read them in any order.
you can.
But even Terry Pratchett, like I was actually just looking at there's an official reading guide for this series. And the Hogfather is not, or I guess it's called the Hogfather, it's just Hogfather, is not a recommended starting point.
Right.
So it is kind of a strange place to jump in. While we were able to enjoy the book, like Barbara said, I feel like there's
you
stuff you would have known about things if you'd read, if you started with Mort, which is the first Death novel.
I just feel like you miss those subtle things that you don't pick up until you're like making the connections, like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So as I mentioned when we did Cinder, enjoy a twisted tale. So I know this isn't like a fairy tale necessarily, but the twisted tale on Christmas kind of hooked me. I like the reimagining of that. I thought that it was interesting and kind of strange and bizarre that hogs were pulling Santa, or not Santa, the Hogfather's sleigh. I thought that was kind of tongue-in-cheek humor about like when pigs fly sort of thing. That could have just been my interpretation, but like, this stuff is so bizarre. Like, that wouldn't happen if pigs flew. And he's like, well, I'll just make the pigs fly. So I thought that was cool. My issues with the book are also more of a like writing nature. I liked his it was readable, like it was easy to read in the sense that like just his choices of words and his humor and his like that sort of thing I liked the voices that he used. I liked the character. I liked just like all of his different, like it was enjoyable to read as far as being entertaining, and the words themselves were, it was for me was formatting, not so much style. And the format that he writes in without the chapters just really threw me off, because like Barbara mentioned originally, like that's how I gauge, okay, I'm going to read 4 chapters tonight, and like I'm sitting there and like with the Kindle, you just never know when to stop. And also the other thing that I really didn't like about the formatting was that he switches back and forth for dialogue between caps and not caps, and that really bothered me too, because I'm like, why are you yelling at me?
It's only done for Death, though.
Yeah,
I know.
Death was the only one with caps lock.
Or Death voice. I mean, he did that on purpose.
I know he did, but I don't like it.
I actually enjoyed that, because I didn't picture it yelling. I picture more of like a God voice.
Like an ominous thing.
Like an ominous
Well, that's what it was, because he said that Death doesn't speak out loud. You just hear his voice in your mind.
I understand all of that. And I'm just saying that I would have been like italics or something. The caps were a little harsh for me.
Fair enough.
But as far as what I liked, I liked a lot about the book. I liked the twist on Christmas. I liked the world building. I liked the badass female character. I really enjoyed Teatame. He was perfectly mad and insane and just like a really fun villain. And the point that hooked me in was the poker with Susan at the beginning.
Beat up
Yeah. Because I'm like thinking, oh, she's just going down there to like appease the children, and then they like describe her like dragging the body up, or like, and so yeah, I was like, all right, I'm with you, Terry.
So let's talk about Susan. Susan and Death have a family relationship, as we find out later in the book.
You would have known had you read the books.
You're right, you would have known, but she is his adopted granddaughter because her mother was his adopted daughter.
Right, technically it's his granddaughter. She's
I guess that's true. She would just be his granddaughter. So they have a family relationship. She seems to be distancing herself from him throughout the book, although she admits she still cares for him. Do they seem to be closer at the end of the story than at the beginning? And in what ways do they have a typical family relationship? I guess I'll start on this one. I think that, yes, they do. I think that she's talked about it. My assumption was that there was something that happened before this book that we didn't really know, that was why she was distancing herself from Death. But do they seem to be closer at the end of the story? I think that's kind of an obvious question. I guess unless you haven't read the book and you're just assuming that maybe they won't be. But obviously, yes, they are closer at the end of the story. I feel like their relationship is one of the bigger arcs of the book that we get at the end of it, when they get the reconciliation and all that. And then, in what ways is it typical? I'm going to steal this part from Lauren's notes. So their relationship is typical in the way that, anybody's relationship, or I guess a normal relationship with a grandfather and a grandchild is. grandfather cares about the grandchild looks up to the grandfather in some ways, and I think that's what makes their relationship quote unquote typical. It's the only thing that does.
I guess I don't even need to say my partner. No, I'm just kidding.
Wow.
Hide your notes from Michael.
Hide your notes, hide your wives.
It's so,
Stealing them all.
so unbelievable we'd have similar ideas. This one's a pretty obvious question, I feel like.
Whatever. It's the way you phrase it. You just take our wording exactly.
I cited Lauren.
He did this time.
It's true.
Okay, so I feel like that they do get closer as the book progresses, and the only typical thing that I noted as well was that Death looks out for her like a grandfather would. Like at the end when he winks at her, I thought that was hilarious, because then afterwards she's like, "You winked at me, you had a plan. I thought you had a plan," and he's like, my plan was to see what you did.
Yeah, I mean, kind of like what you guys both have said, obviously, I feel like we would have understood their family relationship a little bit more had we read the other books where they both are in the books. And I do feel like something obviously happened for her to feel this way. You notice that she's begrudgingly, doesn't really care to be a Death. What is the word I'm looking for here? When you have you're teaching someone your
Protege.
Yeah, a protege or mentor, something like that. Like, obviously he's Death and she has his powers, but she begrudgingly uses it. Like, she tries to be as human as possible. And she mentions that in quite a lot of the book, saying like she can't forget how to be a human. Yeah. So I feel like there's something that we're missing there, but in their relationship that happened, that's why she feels this way towards him. But yeah, obviously they have the relationship in the sense that I feel like they have that banter and like family banter, and like how Lauren mentioned at the end where he kind of like he winked at her and she's like, "I thought you had a plan," and he was like, "My plan was to watch your plan," and she's like, "That's not a plan," and it was cute. And I do feel like they had a strained relationship, I think, in the beginning of this book, and with how it unfolded, I think towards the end, I think it was the starting to build that relationship back up to whatever maybe it previously was.
So we're going to talk about Susan a little bit more now. So Susan names off several different things that she's able to do because she is Death's granddaughter. Did she seem to receive anything from Death in regards to a personality trait? And I will let Lauren start on this one.
So I just put her empathy that she has, because I thought it was really interesting the way that Death was portrayed throughout the novel, as far as like just being like very almost caring, like and empathetic throughout, even though he's like this ominous character, like just very forgiving and kind of, I don't know. So I feel like they shared that.
Barbara?
What Lauren mentioned, like, he's not your stereotypically written Death. Like, he's not the scary person. And it's funny because you can tell, like, I feel like when we were reading him as the Hogfather, because he took over the Hogfather's responsibilities, like, it was watching, like, a little 12-year-old kid in, like, a candy store. Like, he was having a blast doing this, because even in
giving away free stuff.
Yeah, like, in part of the book, he even mentioned, he's like, yeah, most people, when I arrived, like, they're not happy to see me because he is Death. That means you died. Being the Hogfather, people are excited to see him, and you can just see him, like, kind of light up and be, like, excited for that. I feel like her moral compass from him, because he is a type thing. Like, he doesn't, like, and he even says this in the book. He's like, just because you're rich, it doesn't mean you're going to die. Like, you die, that's your time. Like, he doesn't pick the poor from the good versus the evil versus the rich and stuff like that. Like, he's just a neutral character in that sense. And I feel like she gets that neutrality from him as well. And maybe from other books, we might kind of pick up on some of their other together personality traits. I feel like maybe she gets her strong will from him too, because obviously he's technically not supposed to be dabbling in the mortal world and preventing the Hogfather from doing stuff, and that's why he kind of had Susan do it. And I feel like she kind of picked up what he was throwing unconsciously, like she didn't realize that's what was going on, but she did. So, no.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I think it's kind of cool that she, even though she's not directly related to him, she's like inherited some of his powers, so that was kind of neat.
Yeah.
I mean, the coolest power of hers is obviously that she can walk through walls.
Is that cool? Because I think the cool is riding the pill.
Being able to ride the horse.
The pill Pale Horse of Death.
And the poker.
The poker. I mean, all of her abilities are really cool. Like, she gets this cool, like, invisible sword that has, like, not invisible sword, like, it's like, it's energy sword or something like that.
Death's sword?
Yeah, Death's sword, like,
she borrowed that from Death's house.
No, he gave it to her.
He gave it to her?
Yeah, because he's like, oh, no, I lost it, because when Titan took her sword, she's like, I lost it. He's like, I'll just make you a new one.
Yeah.
Like,
so the original one she had borrowed from him, and then he made her.
But
and the other thing I think she got, not necessarily from Death, but I think that her sensibility, which I know she talks about as kind of a character flaw at times, that she's very logical and she thinks about things, and she, in like in tense situations, she'll be able to. She's the one you want there because she'll figure it out. And when I was doing some research into the characters on this, one of the things that popped up was that her parents tried to really get her to be like, make her be sensible and have that be like her train of thought to kind of counteract the foolishness and the lack of sensibility that Death has. And so she's got kind of the best of both worlds there. But yeah.
Yes, people say that about me too.
So the next question, was the book the right length? Were there parts you wanted the author to expand on? Were there parts you wanted to be shorter? Or maybe not at all? And I can go first on this one. And I thought the book was kind of short compared to other stuff we've read, especially other fantasy books we've read. I guess this kind of falls in that category, but I thought it was a little bit short. But then had to remind myself, like, this is part of a 40-book series, and so there's going to be lots of detail that you're not going to get.
40 books?
40.
In Discworld.
In the Disc, not just these characters. In the overall Discworld, like Terry Pratchett, it's a 40-plus book series.
Damn, Terry.
So yes, I thought it was kind of short, but had to remind myself, like, there's tons of books to read if I want more detail.
Michael thought it was short. I thought it was appropriately sized. And that's because Michael usually picks 600-page books. And Lauren prefers ones that are sized.
Size 400.
The book that I'm currently reading,
400 is plenty.
outside of the podcast, is 1,000 pages. So
Yeah, you tried to pick a 1,200-page book for like one of them, and we ixnayed you.
We decided to limit the
page numbers.
Barbara,
what about you?
Oh, are you done with your thoughts?
Oh, yeah. I just thought it was
I thought you were. Sorry.
It's appropriately sized. There's a joke in there somewhere.
Yeah, I thought it was good for the story. I think too long it would have dragged it out. I feel like I wanted to know a little bit more about maybe death and stuff like that, but obviously that's why I'm excited to read the other parts of his subplot in the Discworld. I've already mentioned that the only parts that I thought was kind of random, which I still enjoyed, but it didn't do much for the overall plot, was just those random side characters that were just kind of thrown in. But I understand he was building the world and talking about, Hogwatch and all that stuff, and the Hog season. I don't know what to call it. A Hogwatch season.
Hogwatch season.
Yeah. So I feel like it was pertinent in the sense to build the world and get a sense of this world's quote unquote Christmas. But outside of that, I thought it was a perfect length. I didn't think it needed to be any longer than it was, really, because I feel like at that point it might have dragged and then been too much.
Yeah.
As a side note, though, like in my head, I kept reading Hogwash whenever I would read Hogwatch, and then it made. Is that a play on words? Like, because Hogwash is like
a British slang term.
Yeah, just like something silly or whatever. Yeah. So I was like, probably is.
Oh, another little thing I think it was hard to do on the Kindle was the asterisks, the side notes of it. The Kindle version was all over the place. Footnotes, yeah.
That was hard to follow.
Yeah, I think honestly, maybe I might just pick up the actual hard copy of these books because I feel like it's more pertinent to Kindle. I feel like whoever decided to make it Kindle did not do a very good job.
Next question: who was your favorite character?
Oh my gosh, I have too many favorite characters. I love Susan. I loved Death. I loved how sensible she was and how humorous he was because he really, like, reading it, he reminded me of like this, what I would think like it would be a 12-year-old kid who got to play Death. Like, he was having a blast playing the Hogfather, and he was enjoying like giving little children ponies, even though sensibly that child shouldn't have gotten a pony
or a sword.
Or a sword, yeah, with like chainmail and all this stuff. Like, that was hilarious. I really enjoyed him. I loved Tea Time. Like he was just creepy enough, and he was like that super smart and creepy and very skilled and evil, but not in the sense of evil. Like he did things with purpose, and it wasn't like the normal sense of what you think of an evil character, like a malevolent character. He was good at his job. That's essentially what it was. And then I loved the side characters of the what are they called? The Death of Rats, which his name is the Grim Squeaker, and his little raven. Like I love them. Anytime I see, and I wanted more of them. I'm like, where are they? Like, because I thought it was just so funny. Like squeak, 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 and then the raven just like bust out like, this is what he said. Cracked me up. And even the wizards, for all their like randomness, their back and forth humor between them all was really hilarious and funny. So
there's usually at least one we all hate, but
I know there really isn't. Like even the Happy Fairy or like the Sock Stealer God, or even Philip.
The random.
Yeah, they're like he was like a cross between like an elephant looking type of thing, or even like the God of
Hangovers.
Bilibus or Bilius. Billy, whatever how you pronounce his name. He was hilarious, and I thought it was funny when he was like drinking all this stuff, so his counterpart would get the hangover, and he's like, haha, like suck it. Like that was funny. So I just loved all the characters. I think this is why I love this book so much, because I enjoy plot, and I like books that are even with plot and character. But if you're going to give me one or the other, I feel like if you're going to give me just character-driven stories, it has to be really well-written characters, and he did a fantabulous job of that. Just overall great. He writes characters very well. And when you were switching scenes, you could tell who was that character, because he did a very good job of fleshing out the characters and not making them so one-dimensional in the sense that you had no idea. If you were switching scenes and didn't tell who was speaking at that, you could tell who was that character.
Yeah, they had distinctive voices.
Yes, that's the word.
I'm between Susan, because I like Susan, and Teatomy. I loved Death, and like Barbara was saying, he was just hilarious. And I do have to include just his little quote about the sword when he was giving Child. And the mom's like, you can't give her that, it's a sword. And it's not safe. And he's like, they're not meant to be safe. And then the mom's like, she's a child. It's educational. What if she cuts herself? It'll be an important lesson. That was one of my favorite parts. But anyway, I really liked Susan, as I mentioned earlier, because she's just kind of a badass female character. And then I'm all for a good villain. And so I thought that Tea Time was a really well-written, conniving, truly mad villain. And so I just really liked him. And I mean, obviously, Susan's a badass nanny who kills monsters with her poker, and she's part death, so you can't really get better than that.
True. So for me, it was either Death or Tea Time. I'm not going to say his actual name because it's a pain in the ass to pronounce, but I really liked Pratchett's version of Death. I thought it was really cool. I thought it was very unique. It was very different from what we're used to, and I especially liked when Death was pretending to be the Hogfather, like Barbara was talking about earlier. I thought that was really fun. Similar to what Lauren said about Tea Time, I thought he was a really well-written villain. He was very, like, he seemed like genuinely crazy, but in like a sane sort of way. Like he knew what he was doing, but it was like you described it as mad. I think that's a good way to put it. But he was very well written, very, very dark, very mean. I also really liked Albert, though. I don't think anybody mentioned Albert.
Nobody mentioned Albert.
Death's little side Candyman, whatever you want to call that.
Yeah.
Sidekick.
I liked him,
with the Hogfather, and a lot of his little quips that he made were pretty entertaining too. Let's see. Good. So next, we're going to talk about what quotes and passages stood out to you, and I'll start with mine on this one first. There's a quote at the end of the book, close to the end of the book anyway, where Death.
Since there's no chapters, you don't know.
Death and Susan were talking about like why we need this like belief in all these like fake things like the Hogfather or the Tooth Fairy. So I'll just read the quote. It starts out with Death talking. So Death says, "Humans need fantasy to be human. to be the place where the falling angel meets the rising ape. Susan says, tooth fairies, hogfathers, little. Yes, as practice. You have to start out learning to believe little lies so that we can believe the big ones. Yes, justice, mercy, duty, that sort of thing. They're not the same at all, said Susan. You think so? Then take the universe and grind it down to the finest powder and sieve it through the finest sieve, and then show me one atom of justice, one molecule of mercy. And yet, Death waved a hand, and yet you act as if there's some ideal, as if there is some rightness in the universe. Susan said, yes, but people have got to believe that. Or what's the point? Death interrupted. My point exactly. I thought that was a really fitting quote, not just for Discworld, but for our world too. Like that we have to gotta believe the little stuff so you can believe that the bigger stuff, and not necessarily lies like Susan is insisting, like you have to believe these lies, but you have to believe in these ideals. Whether it's the Hogfather or Santa Claus or, like Death said, like justice,
Hope,
mercy, hope, duty, all of those things. Like you can't go to the store and buy a basket of justice. Like that's just
be nice.
So yeah, that was my favorite quote. That was really well written. That was a really poignant conversation that they have in the book. Barbara, you want to do yours next?
Sure. I don't have a favorite quote. It's a favorite, like, a moment that kind of just rang to me, or whatever the saying is.
Barbara's going to read you 10 pages from the book.
No, I'm going to skip. No, I'm going to skip around. So it's between Death and Albert, which is his, like, what would you say Albert is? His
sidekick,
I guess. So they're talking about when Death went in to try to give this poor family some presents, and Death wanted to give them like a bunch of stuff, and Albert was like, no, you can't do that, and that's kind of setting the scene, I guess. Death says, be happy with what you've got. Is that the idea? And Albert says, that's about the size of it, master. A good God line. That don't give him too much and tell him to be happy with it. Jammed him. See. And Death said, this is wrong. Death hesitated. I mean, it's right to be happy with what you've got, but you've got to have something to be happy about having. There's no point in being happy about having nothing. Albert says, I don't know. I suppose people would say they've got the moon and the stars and such like. And Death says, I'm sure they wouldn't be able to produce the paperwork. And then it kind of skips around. And then Death says, it is unfair. And then Albert says, that's life, master. And Death says, but I'm not. Albert says, I meant this is how it's supposed to go, master. And he's like, no, you mean this is how it goes. And then Death says, it is Hog's watch, and people die on the streets. People feast behind lighted windows, and other people have no homes. Is this fair? Albert says, well, of course, that's the big issue. And then Death says, the peasant had a handful of beans, and the king so much he would not even notice that which he gave away. Is this fair? And Albert replies, yeah, but if he gave it all to the peasant, then in a year or two, he'd be just as snooty as the king. And then Death says, naughty and nice, said Death, but it's easy to be nice if you're rich. Is this fair? And I just thought that was really interesting.
Yeah,
I also thought that was
it's not a quote. It's just a kind of a moment between them. Like Albert understands it, whereas Death is like grappling with that idea.
I thought that was an interesting section of the book where it was talking about how, like, essentially Albert tells Death that he's not allowed to give the poor people the same kind of gifts that he gives the rich people. Okay.
So my one is when Susan's reading the kids the story of Jack and the Beanstalk, and just the fact that like it's so twisted. But
Yeah.
So and then Jack chopped down what was the world's last beanstalk, adding murder and ecological terrorism, enticement, and trespass charges already mentioned. And all the giant's children didn't have a daddy anymore. But he got away with it and lived happily ever after without so much as, which proves that you can be excused for just about anything if you are a hero, because no one asks inconvenient questions. And I just thought that was super pertinent
Yes.
to like what's going on today.
I thought it was an
And-
interesting way of looking at who's the actual hero in that story versus
Yeah.
the villain, because Jack is kind of the dick who like terrorizes the poor
Giants.
giant.
Yeah,
That quote, the writing style of that particular book reminded me of Chuck Palahniuk.
it did. Yeah, I love it. I loved it. That's why I said earlier, like when I said that I love his writing style. Like I loved reading stuff like that. I just didn't like the form.
So this next question, I think we've already answered, or at least some of us have already answered, but I'm going to ask it anyway, which is, would you read another book by Terry Pratchett? Why or why not?
I need them to make an audiobook because
They're audiobooks.
there are not.
They're on Apple. They're not on Audible.
Come on, Audible. Okay, well, I'm gonna have to buy the audiobook, my chapter issue, my formatting issue, and my having an infant issue. So yes, I would read.
They seem to
more
be
books.
exclusively on Apple's.
I definitely would.
We already got
pick
some
up.
of them.
Yeah, I want to pick up for sure all of the ones that 100% like Death is a main character in it, because I do know that he features in all but like 2 of the Discworld books, but I've read that it's like sometimes he just has like a one line or something, like an from line here and there. I definitely want to pick up his, and then I was kind of doing some research on some other like sub series in the Discworld that sounded cool that I would like to pick up, because I like Warren mentioned, I like his writing. The way he writes, his writing style, not the formatting, but like his
you guys made
verbiage, the way that he writes the characters I love, even like the random plot of this book about, what it means to the meaning of Christmas, essentially. That's what this is like. And it's the perfect timing for it. It's the holidays and everyone's watching all the Christmas movie and the meanings of the holidays, and this was a perfect time.
So on that note, we actually should point out that this was not intentional to be reading the Hogfather at Christmas time. That's just
the way it worked.
How it worked on our schedule. Because when we get these recommendations from you guys, a lot of times we just add them to our list. We don't read the summaries before, but ahead of time. So this just happened to be time for this. So yeah, my answer is yes. I want to read more. Like I said, Barbara and I already got some more, and Barbara has some specifics she wants to go out and get to. So I'm excited to read more of his books. They were entertaining. They're fun. They're light. It's a good, like, fun, non-heavy, like you were saying earlier, not a heavy read. So yeah, I'm definitely going to read some more.
Would this be a good time for me to insert my parallels with Harry Potter? Because we have to include that.
The next question can be, what parallels did you see between Hogfather and Harry Potter?
Thank you, Michael. So, because this was in my notes, because, Barbara and I always have to connect it, and it's so easy to make connections because they're everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But the glowing dust that was used, I felt like was kind of similar to Floo powder. It's like a cross between Floo powder and a port key.
This was written around the same time Harry Potter, the first one, came out, wasn't it?
I don't know.
Because I think 97. Harry Potter came around 90. I think it was like 96. No, that's what I'm saying. Like Harry Potter was like 96, 97.
So there was that, the glowing dust. And then all of the hourglasses, all of Death's hourglasses, and the reminded me of the Hall of Prophecies. And then Tammy's creepy eyes with the glass eye.
Just say tea time.
Tea Time's creepy eye reminded me of a cross between Mad Eye Moody and when we read The Darker Shade of Magic. I can't remember that character's name.
What was his name? Sorry, H. You're talking about the kind of bad guy, right?
No, it was Cal that had the fake eye.
Yeah, but what are they called? The people with the eye. The
time traveling.
Yeah, the time traveling.
Not but between world travelers. I forgot what the actual name is. Poop on us.
Anyway, those were my connections. Oh, and when they made the boogeyman, it was totally a Bogart.
Yeah.
Bogart.
Yeah.
Man.
I would just say like the university for the wizards, stuff like that, you have that, and how it's just a normal school with students learning to be wizards, and that was interesting. Kind of a little connection there in the magic where it takes place in our world, but slightly different, our version of the world. So
I know Michael gets annoyed when we do that, but
every podcast episode has to have a mention of the Harry Potter series.
It always does. If you go back to listen to all of them, there's always something in there. I don't have an answer to this question because I don't always think about Harry Potter when I'm reading.
You mean you don't always compare all literature?
No, I'm reading other works of fiction. I'm not thinking, could this be comparable to Hagrid?
I don't always think about it, but
what did you guys think of the setting of this book? And we talked about this a little bit, and the world building that he did. Enjoy it? Did you want more? I'm gonna let Barbara start on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed the world building that he did. I wanted more of it, to the point where obviously I'm going to pick up more of the series and stuff like that, because I enjoyed how it wasn't high fantasy where it's completely not our world, and so I feel like he didn't have to completely build a lot of, because it's just our world with like slightly different things in here, like the Wizard University, and then how Christmas is called Hog's Watch, and the Hogfather versus Saint Nick and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of like a parallel parallel of our world with a slight disorientation of it. I thought it was a really cool world, and I want to know about Discworld and all the other towns, because apparently this place just takes place in one town, like Soker. I don't know how you pronounce it, like Absoker or something like that.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to know like what other parts of Discworld that we haven't even touched upon that I'm very curious to know, and if it's going to be kind of more of a mirror image of our world, or if it's even more different. So
what's the name of the actual city? Because it takes place in
it's Absoker.
Ankh or
That's it.
That's the main continent that all of
that was the main city.
No, that's the name of the continent.
I don't know. I think it's.
I just looked on Terry Pratchett's wiki page. That's the continent. Ankh Morpork is the main continent of Discworld.
So then what's the city?
I don't know. I couldn't find the city's name. It takes place in different cities, but...
Well, yeah, like the university, obviously, and then the Tooth Fairy house and the Hogfather's house and all that stuff.
I also really liked the world. I thought it was...
The Antari.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I thought it was very interesting. I'm excited to read more about it. I think that, like Lauren and Barbara and we were all saying earlier, like it's like, who thinks of like of this, like this whole universe that he created, similar to our own, but different enough to be entirely different. So yeah, I really liked the world. That's one of the things that makes me want to read, that I want to learn more about what's going on and learn more about the magic university and all that kind of stuff. So I liked it. Lauren, what about you?
I liked it. I always liked the dystopian type worlds. I thought that this one was super interesting. I did not realize that there were 40 books in the Discworld.
Yeah.
I did not realize that this was standalone as far as like that goes. So taking those things into consideration, I feel like I definitely want to know more. I mean, I wanted to know more, but now that there is more to know.
Yeah.
So
lots more.
That was good. Probably not going to read 40 books by him, just for time's sake, but I definitely would read more of the death ones in specific, I think.
Fair enough. Okay. What about the ending? What did you guys think of that? Was it satisfying? Did you enjoy how the book came to a conclusion?
I was satisfied.
Well, Lauren, go first.
Yes, you will.
I mean, you already jumped in, so go ahead.
I was just going to say, I liked the ending. I thought it was good. The fact that like Susan was the hero, but then Death was also the hero. Like, kind of, I liked how that was. The villain falls always, so that was typical. But I didn't put it down, and like some of the books that we've read, and I'm like, that was like I wasted my time. That was so shitty. Like I'm so disappointed. Like I was satisfied. It was like a neat little bow.
I liked the scene at the end with when Ridcully finally figures out why the bathroom was bricked off.
Yeah,
because the orangutan starts playing the organ. That was funny.
Yeah, I agree. I thought it was a perfect way of ending it. Like I had all my answers, all my questions answered.
Yep.
The horse before the carriage moment there. Or carriage before the horse. Dang, I did it again. Yeah, I thought it ended well. Like I was satisfied with the ending. Wasn't like, oh no, I want to know more. Like now I want to read more about these characters and stuff like that. So yeah, I was satisfied with the ending. I think it was perfect.
Yeah.
With how the story kind of came to a conclusion. So.
Yeah, I agree. It was well written. It was exciting. Susan saves the Hogfather. They kill Tea Time. All is right in the world.
Tea Time.
Death goes back in time and buys the rocking horse.
Yeah, I thought that was
Albert really wanted. Like the scene I mentioned. All the scenes with Ridcully and like the Chancellor weren't really necessary, but they were usually very comical.
Yes, the wizards were hilarious. They were the ones who figured out why all these random minor gods were popping up in place because the Hogfather of Death, and to counterbalance things. Anytime you thought of something, a god of something, it would pop up. Like the
disappearing pencils one.
Yes, the disappearing pencils. Obviously, the disappearing sock one. The the god fairy of happiness, and she just kept crying because no one was happy. And then, they were trying to be happy for her sake. Obviously, the hangover god, and then the god of
the soul cake duck.
Yes,
what even is that?
I have
I googled that one.
It was good. I enjoyed the ending. Good, proper ending of the book. It had like the big climactic conclusion, and then you got like the little bit of wrap ups afterwards with the rocking horse and the little scene with the bathtub and all that kind of stuff. The end, it really wrapped it up. So I really liked it. Review section. Let's go over our individual scores. Barbara?
I gave it a 7.25. I really enjoyed it.
I'm just gonna go back.
Oh,
sorry.
What?
Barbara was right, and Ankh-Morpork is the city on the disc.
Suck it.
The largest city on the disc where most...
Suck it. I was right.
So I just wanted to throw that.
It is a city.
Okay.
And I'm also on... Yeah, it's a city.
Ha! I knew it was a city. Anyways, the individual score, 7.25. Sweet spot. I enjoyed it. That's all I gotta say. Like, I'm not gonna... It's not my favorite book, but I enjoyed reading it more so than some other ones we've read, honestly. So, yeah, I think that's kind of like enjoyable read.
So I gave it a 7.5 out of 10. I really enjoyed the book, and that's kind of slightly above average for my overall rating of all the other books we've done. So yeah, 7.5 out of 10 for me.
I gave it a 7 out of 10, which is pretty good for me, because I usually don't score super high.
You're pretty harsh.
I enjoyed it. It was a fun read. Again, like if I could get the audiobook, which now I know where to locate one. I have Audible, so I don't even look at the app because I pay for Audible already. So,
That makes sense.
yeah. But like I said, just if the formatting wasn't an issue, it'd probably for me. But
so with those three scores, our group score ended up being a painful 7.25,
which is just the sweet spot of average for me. So I'm good with that.
Yeah, 7.25 out of 10. We all enjoyed the book. I think we'd recommend it to pretty much anybody who's otherwise interested in this kind of stuff. So,
especially for this time, like if you're looking for a quick holiday read, if you're tired of Netflix or Hallmark Christmas movies, just pick up this.
I would say it's even a fun book that if you're a parent with a little like elementary school age kids, not like a kindergartner. Maybe no, you don't think so. You don't think it'd be a good story for?
I think it might be over their heads. I think there's a lot of.
I think it would be over their heads, like a lot of Disney movies though, when we were kids, where there was like the kids would get the story, and the humor would be over the kids' heads, and the parents would enjoy that.
Well, but there's death. People die.
PG probably. I'd say it's PG. I don't think it's PG-13. Reached the end of another episode, episode number 12. Thank you guys so much for listening. We are Badass Literature Society. Hopefully you liked it. If you did, let us know. Get on Apple Podcasts or wherever you guys listen to podcasts and leave us a rating. That helps us a lot. So the podcast is seen by more people. And
recommend us to your family and friends.
Yeah. Especially if
you hate us, your nemesis. I don't care at this point.
If you've got a book recommendation, let us know. Comment on our Instagram. Send us a direct message. However you want to get that to us, that's just fine. Make sure you follow us on Instagram. Places is at Badass Lit Pod. We'll see you guys next month.
And again, congratulations, Carswell Captain Thorne.
Yes,
for winning our test.
Yes. We look forward to working with you and figuring out what book we'll be sending you. So,
thanks again for everyone else who participated. We really taking time out of your busy day to do that with us.
We had fun coming up with this one, so I assume we'll be doing some more of these in the future. So be on the lookout for that as well. We'll see you guys next month. I'm Michael.
This is Barbara.
And I'm Lauren.
Bye.